This is PwC's vision for analytics and AI transformation, an end-to-end solution that can empower your business to extract more value from your data. Whether you're in the business of developing cutting-edge products or trying to help provide customers with next-level service or fishing, we can team with you, helping you harness your own sea of data and fueling your bottom line.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Track 5, Lessons Learned, Success Stories. My name is Bob Audette. I'm a partner of data management at Guidehouse. And today's session is about data analytics, AI, and really seeing that in action. And a couple things that we're going to learn from this session and this panel, that companies are really delivering significant business outcomes in data analytics and AI, and really continue to grow and develop these capabilities related to organizational culture, data analytics technologies. They continue to evolve. This discussion, really hosted by PwC and the panelists, will really highlight some real-world examples from companies that are delivering such data and AI business transformation efforts. A couple logistical things. The session is going to be filmed, and those proceedings will be available, I believe, on the app that is available. There will be video recordings on the CDOIQ YouTube channel about 3 months from after the symposium. Regarding Q&A, especially for those in the room, my ask for everybody, please, is to raise your hand first. Don't speak until you have the mic in your hand, because otherwise the individuals that are on the virtual session will not hear you. So please kindly follow that guidance. And for those that are online, and even in the room, feel free to submit your questions using the Whova app. And we will, the panelists will be looking at your questions and trying to address those, time permitting. And with that, I'd like to at least introduce the panel moderator, Sachin Khairnar, partner at PwC. He leads the data analytics and AI consulting services for technology and media communications industry. And really, he's working with a host of Fortune 500 hyper-growth types of companies that are really delivering these types of solutions. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Sachin to further introduce himself and the other panelists.
Thank you, Robert, and thank you all for joining this session with us. Robert did a great job in introducing myself. So in addition to focusing on clients in my industry, I also kind of go across the industries to bring lessons from tech and telco companies and applying that to other companies as they become more tech driven, as most of the companies are becoming kind of digital and tech first companies in disrupting their own business models. But before we jump into the session, I would like to ask my kind of esteemed panelists to introduce themselves for a minute, so you all have the context of where they'll be coming from as we get into the discussion. So maybe, Justin, we can start with you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Justin Vogle. I have the privilege of representing Oklahoma Gas and Electric. We're the electric utility in Oklahoma. We service around 890,000 customers in Oklahoma and a portion of Arkansas.
I'm Sibito Morley. I am the Chief Data Officer over at Lumen Technologies, among many things, providing the world's backbone for data and networking. We also provide a host of technology services, which often people don't know about until we actually talk to them about it. So glad to be here.
Hi, everybody. I am not Cameron Davies, so first and foremost. So my name is Pat Minton. I'm the Global and U.S. Chief Data Officer for PwC. So in my role, I don't focus on our clients as much as I focus on our very large firm. All right, we operate in 160 countries around the world, and we have the same data federation challenges around sharing and governance, and how do you manage all that data into and within our own firm. So that's my focus.
Thank you all for joining, and the reason Cameron is not here is flight delays. That seven delays in his flight, and he could not make it. So he's apologetic for that, but let's just jump into the session. So why don't I start with some broad themes that we've experienced and are observing in the market from data analytics and AI perspective, and they range from the talent issues, the process and culture issues to or opportunities, or the technology kind of evolution, the rapid evolution, and how are you actually embracing those and delivering incremental value. So we are in the middle of finishing our US survey of chief data officers, and some of the themes that came across was the types of initiatives that are being undertaken are moving from cost takeout, like using data analytics to reduce cost or improve efficiencies, and more on the offense side, not only in kind of enabling cross-sell, et cetera. I mean, that's been there, but more in terms of enabling business to create new business models, to launch new products faster, to track their adoption better with better collection of the telemetry and the usage, et cetera. So what we are seeing is the rapid shift into driving the business disruption itself or enabling that through data analytics, and that has really put these kind of roles at the forefront towards in the real C-suite as well, to really drive the company strategy with the data strategy as well. But the reality hits when you actually start executing, and that's why we have the panelists today to share what they've been doing, how they are navigating those challenges, et cetera. And we want to make it obviously interactive, but to a certain extent provocative as well, because we are all practitioners in the room here, so we know kind of it's less marketing, real kind of execution talk. So why don't I start with Sibito? And Sibito, I know in working with you for a couple of years, I mean, you really driven a really interesting agenda given how Lumen has grown and changed its own business model. So would love to hear like how what you've been doing there, and we'll get into that.
Yeah. I think the biggest shift we've been making is thinking about data in terms of its intrinsic value and what we can do with it, and tying that to the concept of a product. And if you treat your data as a product, you understand not only what's in it, but also the value it creates and what its value is to different parts of the business, both internally and externally. And that became the basis of, it's almost cliche in some circles, but really creating a marketplace. So we have not only identified the data of highest value, that's where we invest our money and our effort, but then we also create the ability we create a storefront so you can find it. It has an NPS score. We give people the ability to score it. We can also give it a transaction score, quality score, so they can see both who cares about it, what's its value in terms of how people use it, how often is it being used, and they can make decisions about what data sources to use. And our approach is to, as we bring that data, bring all data forward. So while all sources are not created equal, we want all of them to be equally accessible with the right parameters of security, et cetera. And then that allows us to then expose it. So if the data is valuable internally or someone sees a source that perhaps creates value for an external use, then we have an automated process where you can create virtualized data sets. You can then expose it through API, and you can actually share it with the customer through our security framework to establish quickly how valuable is it. And then we generate value together with our customers quickly rather than going through the traditional long-ended life cycle of productization. And that allows us to innovate more quickly, it allows us to have real-time insights into how the data is being used, and then ultimately allows us to get rid of data, which is also part of our strategy. Not all data is created equal, and not all data needs to be invested in long-term, and that's a big part of it.
Let me build on that and ask you to share. I think there's very interesting AIOps and ML platform work you've driven, because that has actually changed how you serve your customers. So if you can kind of share a little bit about that.
Yeah, so when we were looking at, so the company's been doing AI for a while. I think everybody says they're doing AI and there's different value appraised to it. But what we found was there was a lot of logistical operational barriers that were preventing actual unleashing of the data value. And so one of the first things we said was, don't worry about where it sits. Tell us where you want it to sit. You want it in the cloud, you want it on premise, you want it at a certain place, and then we'll automate it. The second thing was we implemented an approach where we said, thou shalt not copy. So we've avoided copies at all costs where possible. Sometimes operationally you have to do it. But even that process has been automated so that when someone says, I have a contextual domain of data I want to create, bringing in 3 or 4 masters, virtual pointers, being able to create the pipelines. And then we've automated the API pipelines so we can create APIs to that virtualized data set within 10 minutes, regardless of where it sits, and then make it consumable, private or consumable. But that is then unleashed. So now we focus on less on where and how to get it there and more on how do you want to use it, and enabling tooling. And then, quite frankly, growing our data scientists in the business so that I have the AICOE, but enabling the business to hire their own data scientists to use common tools, common frameworks. We have common libraries where we use. And then we also employ a very robust AI ethics practice on top. So we have both peer review as well as we have automation that goes through and tests the models, looks for bias and looks for variance or divergence on a quarterly basis. So we're always looking at them to see are they really producing what they expected, and then ultimately are they performing. And that in a context of enabling the business allows them to move faster and also allows them to decide whether something's working or not, because then we give them measurable metrics, not only of how much it costs to run the model, what does it actually cost to move that data and provide that data, but then what is the value that they're creating from it. And then every month we meet as a COE with the business leaders and we vote and we say, does this go or does it stay? And we make a collective decision on how to use it, which has made a big difference. It makes us, we're building models at a rapid pace, but we're also retiring models quickly too when they're not yielding the value.
That's great. That's a perfect segue into Justin. I think your efforts at OG&E and enabling kind of sales and supply chain. So why don't you share your journey so far and what you're driving with it? Right?
Yeah. So when I began the role that I'm in now, we started really evaluating, trying to find analytics that delivered high value to the organization. And one of the things I discovered very early on is we didn't have a lot of data reusability, and we didn't have a lot of data readiness. Right? We said we had data readiness, but we really weren't ready. Right? It's kind of like the gentleman spoke about this morning. Right? Like you back in from this really advanced predictive element. You want to do these really great things, but you get into more of a data management kind of activity. But that's where we started. And one of the things that we early on, with PwC's help, we began looking at, in the utility business, so we're, like I mentioned, we're an electric utility, and customers can steal power from us. They can jump a meter. There's many different things they could do. Well, in the past, we had fieldmen go out to actual homes and all those things. Well, with the advancement of technology, we don't have that. We don't have the eyes on the meters. We don't have the eyes in the field to see the problems that could be occurring. And so one of the things that we began to improve upon is we had what we call a fraud model. And we're using this model to use some reporting from we call it a last gasp. If somebody pulls the meter, it sends a signal to us, and so we can see what's going on. But it was very immature, right? We really could add a lot more into it to predict the customers are stealing power from us. And so we began there, and I think that helped us deliver it helped us provide some credibility. It helped our team to say, hey, we're credible. We went out and we executed, we got something done. So when I go and ask for more money, as we inevitably do, I have the credibility now in the organization for our team to ask for those funds. A really recent issue is our team, probably not too dissimilar to any of you. We've really encountered some supply chain issues in our utility space. So we're a poles and wires kind of company, and if we don't have poles and wires, we have some big problems, right? And so we got engaged in this we're calling a rapid improvement event with our supply chain partners. And one of the things that I was excited that our CFO and our CEO, our high-level leaders, because of that credibility that we built, they came to us to say, how can you help, right? And so I think that was a really exciting, that was a kind of a win for our team, but it was also a win for the organization to show we can quickly move. When I took this team over, we had a request in our pipeline that had been sitting there for like a year and a half, right? And we all know analysts and data scientists are the organization. If you have a request out there that's waiting, they're going to figure out a way around you, right? And then that's where you have these siloed IT, the citizen development that's happening throughout the organization. And maybe it's not governed well, maybe there's not standards being followed. But through this effort, within a 24-hour period, we were able to deliver not just 20 different processes, 20 different things for our analysts to be able to improve upon what they're doing in supply chain because of some templates, some different things that we've done in the business to deliver business value. But I think, like I said, if I were to drive anything in that home, it would be, I believe our success has been because of the credibility that we were able to deliver and kind of raise up within the organization.
That's awesome. Can you talk a little bit about the technology components that you had to adopt to be able to deliver this value rapidly, and the methodology that you had to kind of evolve?
Yeah. So we're an SAP shop at OG&E. Our main database that we're leveraging is a HANA database, and we receive every day around 180 million records of meter data into that HANA database. We very transparently, we had a lot of issues. HANA's a great system, and there's a lot of capabilities within that tool, but it really wasn't designed for what we're using it for from a meter data perspective. And so along the way, one of the very first engagements, very transparently, that we did with PwC is, how do we develop a strategy, right? Like, as we think about data and analytics at OG&E, how do we, like you said, how do we identify the data that's going to add the most value to the organization? So through that strategy, the first domain, whatever you want to call it, the syntax aside, we decided on meter data. That's going to deliver, obviously, a huge amount of value to our organization. It's how we basically get paid. It's how I get my check, right? So I want to make sure it's right. So we really started pressing into that domain. Since then, we've begun an effort to migrate all our meter data off of our HANA database with the help of PwC over to ADLS. We're learning new tools and technologies, I would say, at a very rapid pace, and we have a great partner that's helping us, along the way. It's helping us figure some of those things out. There's a Synapse layer. I mean, there's many different things. I'd be happy to talk to you guys more about that, but that's one element. I think another element, as we think about our data journey at OG&E, is really around how do we better govern our data, right? Like, that's, as we identify what those critical data elements are, how do we add the governance around that? And so we're beginning that journey as well, as far as we're fixing to go through a S4 transformation at OG&E and looking at SAP master data governance tool and some different things that could help us in that space. But I don't know if that was where you're going, but hopefully that helps.
Thank you. I do have more questions for you and Sibito, but I'll come back to you. But I'll ask Pat to share. Pat, I mean, obviously, me as a partner and broader PwC team are beneficiary of all the great work you're driving within PwC. So I want to share a little bit with the audience as well. Right.
Sure. Maybe two things. So PwC as a firm, as I mentioned before, we're a network of member firms around the entire world. So think of 160 independent organizations that all operate under an agreement to operate together, but they're all independent companies, which creates very distinct challenges when you're talking about bringing any of that data together for any particular purpose. So I mentioned that just as backdrop. So probably the two things I would highlight is we've been on a journey for the last 3 or 4 years when you think about, we go and help our clients with their assurance and accounting work, their tax work, and obviously we do consulting services for our clients around the world. That's what we do. In the course of doing that, a lot of the times we get data from our clients in the course of doing the project. I used to do a lot of work in the telecom sector, and I would help to do indirect sales channel analytics. Well, they would give me their data, I would build the analytics, and we would use that. But then what do you do with that data once the project's over? More importantly, when you're doing an audit and you think about all the data that you have to get from a company to do an audit, for 150 plus years, PwC had armies of people who went out to clients and took their abacus or however they got the data at that time. Nowadays, they would go out and manually build extraction pipelines to get the data out of whatever random, EMFI systems that the clients were using, manually pull all that data together, standardize it into some common fashion so then we could start using it. When you start multiplying that around the world and all the clients that we have, that's a massive amount of effort that could be automated. So what we did was we built a global data platform to facilitate this, first and foremost. Is how do we automate the process of getting data from our clients to make it easier on them and easier on us? We can provide more value at a lower cost by automating the process. So we built a global data platform. We've got a multinodal deployment around the world. And it really allows our clients to go and install, an extraction toolkit inside their SAP system or JD Edwards or whatever they're using for their financials. And now we can extract the data in an automated, standardized way and really eliminate a ton of that work that both our clients and our teams were spending on this effort. But when you start doing that, then you go, wow, well, we have access to this wealth of data. There must be something more that we could do with this. We operate with a very trustful mindset when we're dealing with our clients. So we developed a client data strategy a few years ago where we said, well, before we do anything, we're going to ask our clients to give us permission to do it. So we developed new policies. Each territory developed new policies. We've been working on these around the world. I've got about 100 territories that have built their own policies now as to how we can go out, ask our clients permission in full transparency around what are we going to do with the data, how are we going to protect it, but being transparent about the fact that we want to use that data in a de-identified and aggregated way to create more value that we can provide back to our clients. And most of our clients are very keen to partner with us on this journey. And so we've been on this process for quite a while, and the access to data that we have now by the virtue of doing this really is a differentiator for us in the market as we build new products and analytic services that we want to take to our clients to help them with their problems. So that's on the client data side. The other thing I would highlight quickly is around all of our external or third-party data that we purchase. We purchase a lot of data every single year. And I mentioned I had two roles. One is the global CDO and one is the US CDO. So focusing on the US territory, one of the big challenges that I took on when I took on the role was nobody knew what we were buying. We thought we were spending, I'll say, close to $100 million a year, but nobody knew exactly how much or who was buying it. Because the interesting thing about a partnership model, we always make this joke, right, is that the bad news is that you have about 3,000, 4,000 people running around the firm acting like they own the place. The bad news is they do. And so everybody feels they can autonomously make the decisions to help their data and analytics practice. Sachin, I'm not looking at you specifically, or whatever else you need, Bob, as you used to do. Go out and buy the data that you want and that you need, but you never look to the left and right to see, has somebody else in the company already bought this? Do we already own the rights to use this? Seemed like a pretty simple problem to solve. It took about a year and a half, but we stood up a governance process effectively, where I pulled together I call it our portfolio management board, where I made our business leadership teams select individuals from their groups that get together on a very frequent basis. We review every new request. We've now taken away all their budget, so that's the real choke point. So everything has to go through this governed board now. All new requests, all renewals as they come up over time. And in the course of doing this, I always tell our board, I can't tell you that 100% of the time that we have a renewal that comes up, we would have traditionally have said, okay, and signed the renewal contract. But I can tell you it's a great percentage of the time that we do. Now, 40% of the time, because we force the business to say, well, do we already have something that we can use instead of this? A lot of the times we do. Maybe we can just use that instead. Maybe we're really not getting the value we think we're getting out of it, and making the business really start to attribute the value that they're getting to that. 40% of the time now, we don't renew the contract, which our vendors don't really care for, but it's created a lot of new capital that we can invest in new data assets that are differentiating above and beyond the things that we already had. So that's a couple of really interesting pieces and really high impact things we've done lately.
Yeah, and just to kind of pile on, since I'm and my other PwC partners are beneficiaries, one of the real value we get is when we get into kind of any pursuit process with clients, etc., proactively or responding to RFPs, our customer master data is always up to speed. It's tagged with fields, whether it's a restricted party to do any consulting business or who owns what relationships, etc. So, Pat, thank you for driving that as well. So, Sibito, coming back to you, and there is a question on Q&A as well. So it's around, and I had a similar question to point to you around. Given kind of Lumen has grown through multiple acquisitions, like historically, CenturyLink, US West Quest, and your data center business, networking business, etc. How did you drive the executive level alignment to kind of adopt this vision? And if you can add more around, in like Lumen has partnerships with multiple cloud providers themselves. So how did you kind of bake in that element as well? So two questions really.
Yeah, I think in my entire career, the success or failure of any program has always been alignment of the executive level, because ultimately they have executive amnesia and they forget why they invested in whatever they're doing the next year. And so typically, because they have a million things going on in that year, they think of everything else they could have spent the money on. And they're like, why did I do this again? So the first thing is really getting them to agree that it is a priority, and understanding what is the value of data, what will data do for them as a business. And not just generally, very specifically, talking about the very specific things that they're investing money in every day that require data quality. And in our case, when I first got there, a very fragmented application of AI and ML, and we were producing, as a company, 300 new RPA programs a year, to differing degrees, but all in silos. So helping them understand first, what are you actually investing? You're spending the money already, so you can spend it in pockets, so you can spend it cohesively. The second was giving them measurements about what is the expected return from that investment in their specific areas, and very specifically getting them to vote on what are the most important data domains for the company. So you mentioned meters, right? Ours, customer, certainly one big one. Account, seems like it's a no-brainer, but when you aggregate many, many companies over the years and you don't consolidate all the systems, that is a tricky thing in itself. And then the location of our assets and our inventory and how they're being used. So, you can work through the list, but we got them to agree to it. And then we got them to approve, okay, if you know what the most important things are, we know what we're going to yield out of it, how do we focus? And then very specifically, we said, if this is that important, then you will commit your time and your resources. So every one of them has a VP that is responsible to be on our Enterprise Data Governance Committee. And we meet monthly, and then we make the decisions there. So our whole hierarchy is not to create bureaucracy, but to create movement. So by allowing them to decide what are the most important things, then they have a person who reports to them who's on that committee, who's responsible every month to make sure that that is driven. And that money then gets allocated to that group to make a decision every month, are we spending on the right thing or not? And then the domain committees, so each of the domains we prioritize has a leader, often a VP as well, but it could be whoever is most closest to it to lead it. And they lead a business group. It's not a closed door. Anyone's available. Anyone can come to it. But guess what? If you're not there, you don't get to protest a decision. And there we make decisions on the data. And that is really critical, because then that hierarchy of decision making then comes up, and we surface it back and we say, this is what we decided, this is how we're spending the money. Do you agree or not agree? If not, tell us now. If yes, get out of the way. We'll talk to you later. We'll show you the benefits. But if you're not against it, then let's go. And that has allowed us to drive movement. And even some of the programs that PwC has helped us with, we went from talking about problems to actually delivering many, many different solutions off of common data sets. And then by allowing that and giving metrics not only along the way of what we said we were going to do, what we thought it was going to yield, and how we're doing it, we're coming back and we're able to say, what have we achieved and how are we achieving it? And that's allowed us to deliver a new domain, a minimum of 3 months within a 3-month cycle, which includes automated cleansing and data validation. And then for each one of those, we have a number of models that come with it that allow us to then start exploring the value created by the data set. And so that alignment at the top, driven down the bottom, and then the continuous loop, right, monthly at the VP level, and they are responsible. We say, what are you reporting to your boss? These are the things you need to go. If you need to get permission, go get it. We're not going to have a special meeting for that. You've got to do that. And then quarterly, getting them to, we review what we did over the quarter and say, are you still in line? If yes, we're going to go.
That's great. I know I had second part question, and it's really interesting story having seen it, given your relationships with each of the hyperscalers. And how you are rapidly delivering kind of domains, and how do you kind of go through that? I think it will be good for audience to hear as well.
Yeah, so probably 2 caveats and then I'll put, right? So what typically happens when you lay out your data strategy is you not only have to get funding and support, but then you got to operationalize it. You got to figure out how to get it delivered. And in this particular, talking about a hybrid cloud approach. I have the blessing and curse. I also have all of the IT operations and enterprise architecture. So what the decision when I went, as I said, I need to be able to not only self-fund many of these things, but I need to be able to drive change. And one of the biggest changes we had was we are a hosting company. We provide hosting services every day, but we're partnered with the largest centralized cloud providers in the world. They consume our network. They depend upon us. We have a relationship. And of course, they always want us to buy more. And there's all that great pressure. And so we said, let's turn that energy into something that's actually meaningful. And so we created these automated pipelines so we can let the business pick where they want to put their data and their workloads through automation. And then we created data pipelines based upon Confluent Kafka that allows us to onboard any new data sources to a common backplane. And those backplanes go to each one of those clouds so we can move the data in and out. We can actually go blue-green on some applications from one cloud to the other now because the data persists or is transmitted through the backplane, not traditional database layer. It's replicated there, it's instantiated there, but that's not where it lives. That allows us to then be able to drive decisions on where we want to not only put it and how do we want to interact, but also some of the commercial models. So we've aligned our enterprise business very tightly with Azure and with Microsoft because they have the same customers as we do, right? They're going to the large enterprise class. But we also have a very strong partnership with Google because they're consumer-based. In our consumer business, right, we're adding 10 million new homes to our network. That's the heart of what they do too. Commonality. And then, with the AWS space, we do a lot in federal. We do a lot in 911, for example. We do a lot of things in common there. So that allows us to target our workloads based upon the non-functional requirements and not have to restrict it based upon the technical. And that didn't just happen overnight. And like I said, the benefit I had was that I could set the data strategy and then I could turn around to my operators and say, okay, this is how we're going to do it, right? And then upstream with the architecture, be able to say, okay, we got to be able to take advantage of that streaming data architecture. But together in a cohesive way, we're able to shift and be able to take advantage of. We're building now bots and doing natural language processing at a level that we never did before. We're allowing ourselves to really get interactive with not only the networks themselves and be able to redirect traffic based upon performance, but we're also be able to communicate with external customers that say, hey, I've got a change in the way I need to consume. What does that need to do? And we're able to feed that into our models and be able to shift. That's all because we put the first layers in place. And by able to do it in multiple places, I'm not married to one cloud provider or one location. I can actually move my workloads in between. And to give you context, we moved 5 major workloads into one of the cloud providers in January, and now in Q3, we're moving them out to another cloud provider just to make sure we can.
Thank you. Justin, going back to you on, it was great for you to achieve that credibility from CEO down. But I have a question for you from a talent perspective, right? So given, so in tech and telco, it's a talent magnet, right? But in utility industry, so given like the data, it's not just the data scientists, but the core kind of data management, data engineering. How are you kind of navigating through that and building your own talent apart from working with PwC teams, right?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that, so very transparently, OG&E has encountered a lot of challenges in that space. When, as probably not too dissimilar to other companies, but when COVID happened, our environment went to work from home. I mean, that was not something that OG&E has done in the past. And then we came back in the office, and our CEO wanted everyone back in the office. And then within the IT space, we observed people getting poached by other companies, right? Very transparently. From the beginning of the year through second quarter, within we call IT TDS, Technology, Data, and Security at OG&E. Within TDS at OG&E, we roughly lost about 14 people to other companies. In context, we have about 3,000 employees, be it contractors or OG&E employees. So throughout the company, maybe that doesn't seem as large, but when you're a legacy environment, so we have a lot of people that have been there a long time in our IT space, and so there's a lot of kind of domain knowledge that those folks have. So a lot of challenges in that space. One of the first things that I've really tried to do in this space is to align the job roles with the work that's being done, right? And so when I took this team over, what I would call a data engineer, his job title was like systems analyst or something, and it didn't make very much sense, right? And so, and then from a competitive edge perspective, right, our HR team is going to the market and they're looking for other systems analyst related roles, and they're comping out one way, whereas you go to the market and you looking for a data engineer role, you might be comping it out completely differently. And so that was a little bit of a challenge because we do everything in job families, and those are some things that we had to work through, but we were successful. So that's been a big win for us, is making sure the role aligns to the work that's happening. I think we still have some work to do in that space. I would say another a really positive relationship that we've developed. So I graduated from Oklahoma State. I'm an Oklahoma State Cowboy. And at Oklahoma State, there's a great data science program. And so we've created a partnership with that data science program to try to ingest interns into our organization. I think very transparently, the thing that we haven't figured out is like, how do we retain them, right? Because utility isn't sexy. Right, like generating electricity isn't sexy. People, these certain people want to go work for Googles and Amazons and these other companies that are in the market, which is fine. But there's a lot of really cool things that we're doing, and I think that through a few of the sessions that I've sat in, and probably through what I'm telling you now, I think we as leaders in this space have an opportunity to ensure that we're telling our stories appropriately, not in IT speak, right? We're selling the success, we're selling the value, we're trying to help people see what we're adding to the business. One of the ways that I've really been trying to do that is as maybe we create a new view or whatever, right? But we're constantly communicating. I came from the call center space. I actually started in the phones in the call center at OG&E. And then I ran the call center for a while. And one of the ways I try to communicate in that space is because you can't just pull all your call center agents off the phone at one time. That would be bad. But I started making videos so I could send a consistent message, right? And so we have an analytics community that we've established. We have what we call data talks, but we also have a Yammer channel. And so anytime we're kind of doing something that I feel like is really important for our community to understand is I publish something to Yammer. But I've digressed a little bit, but I think as we think of developing our team, it's not just my team. I have to develop the community because there's like within the call center, we're having a conversation with our HR group, like rather than going to market all the time, why am I not looking internally for somebody that may have a very high technical aptitude that I could bring them into at maybe an associate level and try to train them up, get them to some skills, some technical skills in maybe ADLS or in Synapse or whatever the tool is, so I can then transition them into a role within our IT department at OG&E. I think there's a lot of opportunities. I think, we have a fire and we say, okay, I need this role. I need a really senior resource, or I need an engineer to come in and solve this problem for me. I need to, as the leader in this space, I have to start thinking about that before that fire happens. So I can get people trained up, I can get them ready to go, and I always don't have to be going out to market to try to find these resources when the competition is fierce.
Sibito or Pat, would you like to add anything to that from a talent perspective?
Yeah, a similar approach. As much as I love to talk about the technology side of my company, I mean, the reality is when people look at it, they think, a lot of individuals think of us as a telecom company because where our roots are, and we have quite a large presence. And they don't think that's sexy either, by the way. And so one of the big things that you described is we have to be able to tell our story. We're doing some just really interesting, amazing stuff. We're talking about, some of the bots that we're building, or some of the analytics we're putting in place to be able to detect and predict failures within a network, to, the stuff we're doing with, every streaming service you can think of rides on our network, and us being able to give feedback to them and tell them how it's performing and who's consuming it and where things are, maybe log jammed. If you can tell that story about how it applies to the end, one, that helps get people interested. Two, really invested in our internship program last year. We got awarded one of the top internship programs in the country, but it's largely because of investment and really just making it very, very specific. I have 17 interns in my program right now. They all have a critical business problem they're trying to solve. And we let them run that problem as the owner. They get resources, we provide them help, we give them guidance, we give them whatever they need, but ultimately we're trying to give them the ability to come in and show that they're not coming in as a junior member, right? They're coming in to be able to help shape the business and drive it. And that excites, young talent. And then the third one, which you described, and you talked about job families, and I think we all fight that if you have an older company. And we have a lot of legacy technology too. Helping people understand how they're going to transition individually, personally transition what they do as we grow and as we develop becomes important, because if they don't see themselves in the path, they will find somewhere else where they see themselves. And it doesn't mean everybody wants to be a hero and everybody wants to be in charge, but they want to see where they fit in the big picture. And that is a large part of it, that, to get them. And then the last thing I would say is recognition, right? Traditionally, IT, this space, we tend to do a really bad job of recognition. We celebrate projects and we celebrate it as great, but we don't celebrate things that make us better every day, or avoid problems, or give us the better data quality, or drive innovation when it's kind of behind the scenes. So we've really been focusing on how do you recognize and how do you celebrate that? Because again, that gives people a sense of fulfillment. So if they see how they fit in the picture, and they see that what they're doing matters, and they see that individually they are a critical part of it, then they tend to stay. We've lost a lot more than 17 or 14, whatever you said. So I won't pretend that we don't have the impact. But the flip side is we are attracting a lot of new talent, and that's where we are as an industry. That's where we are as a world globally right now, economy. So we all have to be able to tell our story and show how they fit in that story.
Thank you. I'll pick up on two keywords you mentioned. I think you mentioned analytics community, and Sibito, you mentioned celebration, like in day-to-day success. So I'll build a question for Pat based on those two, which is, PwC, I've seen it, like there's so much adoption of data analytics and technology across the employees that everybody seems to be an analytics practitioner. So how are you, as a kind of office of CDO and leader, how do you drive that upskilling and the excitement so that everybody's analytics savvy, at least?
Yeah, well, we took a very purposeful approach. We started what we called our digital academies. We stood up training classes, and we committed to training every single individual in the entire world at PwC on data visualization tools, RPA tools, data workflow tools, any number of tools there. And we continue to refresh the training agenda, but we made a concerted push running these sessions all around the world for all of our practitioners, where they all got digital badge certifications around the various topics. It really, again, we're a people business, so it's our people out helping our clients. So empowering our people with the right tools vis-a-vis the platform and the data that I mentioned earlier, upskilling them so they have better ability to use those tools most effectively, creates the most value for our clients. And we've seen that. We've seen a massive uptake in, we actually have, we encourage and we incentivize, i.e. we pay our employees when they come up with a good idea, a new automation and a way to do a task that, if you were typically doing state tax work for a state tax, or a client that was doing a state tax problem, and they went and built an automation and a data visualization around it. We have what we call our digital lab, which is a forum where they can go and submit that as something that's then, we look at it from a governance and curation standpoint to make sure it's fit for purpose and legal and all that good stuff. But once it is, we publish that and make that available all around the world, where our practitioners around the world now can access that automation, that data visualization, that workflow tool, whatever it is, download it into their desktop or workbench on the data platform, customize it as they may need to, or just use it as is to help their clients. And we have thousands and thousands of these assets that have been created and contributed and curated around the world now. And in fact, we opened up about a year ago and started selling select one of these to clients. So you can actually find them online if you're interested. So we have some of these products that we've actually taken now out and made publicly available beyond just PwC employees, so that everybody has a finance department. We build tons of tools that finance departments can really use to help them in their day-to-day work and automate some of the processes they have. So.
Can I comment on that? What you described is like the heart, I think, of the success of our roles, and that is reusability. Now, with reusability comes the responsibility of making sure you inspect them and make sure there's not something in there that shouldn't be there. Let's be clear, because there's nothing faster than something automated that's got a problem. But this reusability becomes critical, because as was described, where you've got these data sets and we've got redundancy and people are buying the same thing, right? Essentially, most of our companies are solving the same problem, just with slight variations. And this idea of creating common libraries where all the data scientists can go and look first. This is the thing we keep emphasizing. Look first, because then you might find something. And if you don't, share, help your partner. That reusability drives a massive amount of not only speed and innovation, but also reduces drag on your organization, on your company, and ultimately de-risks you. So that, I would say, that is probably the most important thing today that I've heard, right, is this concept of reusability, because that will change your game for you as you progress and as you scale.
Would you like to add anything to that?
No, I would just, and like you were saying, the vote up feature. We're trying to, at OG&E, just create visibility into the work that's happening, right? Like to break those silos down of, hey, our power and supply, our power generation folks might be asking for X, but it's very similar to something that could be done on the transmission and distribution side of the business, right? Just creating the visibility for our analysts to see the questions that are happening through the business, so they can reach out to say, hey, like if you just added X, Y, or Z onto this, it would solve this problem over here, right? And giving the ability to like vote, a task up, like, we're still a little immature in the governance space. That's something that we're actively working on. But right now, just giving the community the ability to influence some of the work that's happening, I think has been a big win for us as well.
Never enough time to have this dialogue. I have a lot more questions, but I would like to give mic to audience in the room or on the phone, virtually.
First of all, I just want to thank. Hi, there we go. First of all, I just want to thank all of you it's a great conversation, it really is. So I have a question, and maybe also very interesting from your background, Justin, but also your Sibito unstructured data. And can you give us some insights here on how you're dealing with it, organizationally, how you're manipulating it to get to a form that we can use it to drive business outcomes? Thank you.
Yeah. I'll go first.
After you.
All right. So it's actually at the heart of our strategy. So I'll be really quick. So two things. One thing, and I've gone through the whole, so I'll give you my little spiel I give everybody in the company, right? 2012, people started talking about data lakes, and then it turned into data swamps, where we just throw everything in and we act like everything goes there. The original definition of a data lake was actually where you have common domains, but you have structured and unstructured data together, right? And so we've moved back to that. So I have a customer data domain. It has structured and unstructured data. And I want to be able to manipulate that data together so I can create insights regardless of where that data comes from. The unstructured data isn't as curated, but it's sourced. So I'm not worried about the veracity of the data. I'm worried about the velocity of the data. How do I get it and combine it with my validated? We use that, and then we expose it all through our backplane. So it's all consumable. So anyone who wants to know about customer can find structured and unstructured data together through that backplane. And then if you want a contextual domain, which is very important for us, the syntax so we get people thinking is, if you want to take mastered data with unmastered data and bring it together in context, then we give you the mechanism to be able to create those very quickly so that you can analyze that or use it in context without changing the source or without bypassing, right, to get to some other source.
From a practical perspective, are you using that in call centers when
Absolutely. So we combine that with our unstructured voice data, with the chat data. So omni-channel approach is based upon this. PwC actually helped us build some of the technology and the bots to allow us to really not only address some of those upfront interactions, but then we're giving clues back to quality of service and to our service delivery to folks in a holistic way. So for us, it's very much, don't think about it as different. Customer data is customer data. You want to think about contextually how to put it together, but that's really important.
Yeah, I would just add on to that. I think we're very immature in that space. It's one of those, for the utility industry, that's traditionally, our business is traditionally very slow. And one of the challenges that I'm fighting against is if we don't compete, somebody else is going to compete, right? I think that in this space, for our environment, probably not too dissimilar to some of your environments, but vegetation management is a huge LiDAR. Mm-hmm. You know, we have tree trimming cycles on our circuit, on our grid, right? And it's kind of a yearly cycle. From my perspective, that doesn't make any sense, right? Like, we should be able to leverage the data to know where the vegetation is growing. Now, how do we bring that together with our customer data so we can proactively communicate, right? There's a lot of opportunities in that space, but I think you hit the nail on the head of it can't just be these two different silos, right? Like these conceptual ideas of structured versus unstructured, but we have to bring it together. Because I think our customers deserve that. I mean, very transparently, like, I should be able to communicate to my customers like, hey, we see vegetation growth in your area. We're going to come out and trim it and take care of it. You're not going to be on a cycle anymore, but we're going to kind of proactively handle it. That's vision casting maybe for the future, but some definitely opportunities that we have.
Great. We have a question here.
Oh, just me? Oh, okay. Sorry. Thought you were pointing to someone else. Thank you all for doing this. Sibito, something you said really kind of at the start around ethics and machine learning AI is something I think we're all kind of getting into and tackling. I'd be really interested to hear from all of you kind of what do you think that kind of future state, which could be, maybe just 3 years from now, is in terms of like what's next for ensuring that machine learning algorithms, automated processes are ethical and not doing harm, right? First, do no harm. So I'm just wondering what your all's kind of ideas are for the future of that.
So I'll take first shot. Full transparency, I'm a recovering attorney, so I do have to tell you that. The reality is, if you look at the draft rules that were just released by the EU on AI, specific AI ethics, it's not 3 years from now. It's here. It's coming. Especially their provision they introduced that says you have to show that you're doing privacy by design in any models that you use. So if anybody doesn't know that, you operate in the EU, it's on your doorstep. I think there's 11 states right now that have some provisions in their legislatures that are going to use something similar. Now, whether that number is 7 or whether it's 50, it doesn't matter unless you operate in just a very small place, you're going to get impacted. And we knew that. We saw it coming last year, and so that's why we really aggressively went out. We implemented an AI ethics review platform in December. We've started running all of our models through there. We're running about 500 models a month through it to do reviews. It gives us a lot of visibility. You can pick whatever tool you want. I'm not here selling anything, but I can tell you that we've looked at a few. Some do it better than others. But you got to have something, because you will not be able to do pure human review every month. You should do peer reviews up front, which is what we require before it gets released in production. You have to have at least one peer review. But then we run through the models every month so we can get through a continuous cycle. If you are not doing that, don't be alarmed. There's nothing there yet, but it's coming. So you got to have a path forward. You got to know how you're going to do it.
And I would just add, I think at least for us at OG&E, we have an opportunity to talk with people that are smarter than us. I mean, that's where our relationship with PwC has come into play. Very transparently on our fraud model. Like as we think about demographic dimensions or things that you could add in to potentially predict the kind of customer that's going to steal electricity from you, right? There's some definite moral and ethical implications that come into something like that. And so to have a partner like PwC, whoever, Accenture, whatever company it is, our choice has been PwC, to have somebody come in and say, hey, you really need to think about this because you don't want to, when it is signed into legislator, you don't want to be having to scramble really quickly to figure something out. So.
Yep. I'm conscious of time. Again, never enough time to have discussion, especially when you have esteemed leaders like these three on the panel. In the next 90 seconds I would like to ask each of you to spend maybe 30 seconds each. And what's your one takeaway that your audience should take away from this? It could be anything from talent perspective, patience, etc. Right? I would start with Pat.
Okay. Thanks, Sachin.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
I guess, be bold, right? I actually said this at a similar panel at this conference a few years ago, but I think it still holds true. Things are moving really fast, and so if you kind of take just that tried and true approach and you really just focus on the basics and you're not really shooting and pushing yourself and your team and your organization along, the time's going to pass you by before you know it. So I think you got to really look out there across the big things that you can impact and be bold in it. And, that's what I would focus on.
Thank you. Sibito.
I would say every company, whether they realize it or not, is a data company. And it's just a question of time when you figure it out. And if you are already, great. Make sure you're governing it and make sure you're managing it as an asset. Because it is not only your biggest opportunity, it's also your biggest liability. And then if you can do that, then you can build the structure around how to leverage that asset. everybody will be great. Our problem is we act like it's a secondary thing. Well, we might do it, or well, we'll start investing a little bit. And the reality is, most companies are already so far into being a data company already, they don't realize they're behind the curve. And understanding your both asset and liability as it comes to that is absolutely essential to success, especially in the modern economy.
I would just suggest one of the things that I try to do is just do the right thing, right? It kind of goes back to being bold. We have a lot of internal processes and rigor that tend to slow things down. And so one of the things that I've found, I don't want to say working around those processes, but communicating in a way with the right people at the right time to get them engaged in what we're trying to do, to help them see that we're trying to run faster, we're trying to add value to the organization before somebody else comes in and adds value for us.
Thank you. And I will add one more thing, and I will close out. It's really don't give up. Driving data analytics and AI is not the sexiest job as an executive, right? It's the most politically charged job, lots of challenges, but more importantly, lots of opportunities. So I've been data practitioner since like day one of my career. I've grown along the value chain. So that's what I would add. Don't give up, because the next decade is about data. Thank you all for joining, and I would like to thank panelists. Thank you.